Today, I'd like to share some thoughts, reflections about Pope Francis as we pause for a moment to give thanks for him. For a Catholic, there's a special intimacy, a special feeling for the person who is the Pope. Certainly, he is a leader. We look up to the Pope with great respect, with great affection. But even more, there's that sort of family relationship. Many people have spoken about Pope Francis as sort of a father figure. Somebody, he was older, sort of the age of the grandfather, and you had that intimate relationship with him that I would describe that came a lot from his warmth. Certainly, when he first appeared as Pope, and his many encounters with us, you felt that great sense of love and caring for the flock. Also, a great sense of humility. Certainly, he was not one to hold a position of power over anyone. He was truly of the servant mentality. We saw that certainly in the way he lived. Just a very simple life, not living in the apostolic palace, but in a room in the guest house. He was, even the cars that he drove in, his dress, all of that said a very humble servant. We saw, of course, also his great concern for the poor in the taking of the name Francis. Certainly, that was the indication. Many acts of charity that he did and encouraged his followers to do. And also his concern for the poor, not only that sense of charity, but that other aspect of concern for the poor that sometimes does not go into the mix, and that is an advocate for justice. A lot of times there's a concern for the poor, which is great and important, significant and necessary for all of us. But then that question sometimes is asked, well, why are there the poor? What is it about our economic system that we have poverty? Why do we have people that are homeless? Why do we have people that are hungry? And sometimes we don't ask the question, the why question, and try to advocate, well, maybe we could have a system that's a little bit fairer, a little bit more just for everyone to have an equal opportunity and to really reach out to those that are poor so that they are not exploited, that they are given fair wages, good working conditions, that type of situation. We also saw a Pope that reached out to those who were on the margins. He would visit prisons. He would visit housing that was not the best housing on his apostolic journeys. He would always go to those areas where the housing needed to be improved and greet the people. He would visit soup kitchens. He would reach out to those who sometimes are discriminated against by our society, those who are gay, those who are transgender, minorities. He would reach out to the indigenous peoples and even had a synod for the indigenous and to Rohingyas when he visited, who were discriminated against and moved really out of their country. So he would have that concern, those who were victimized by ISIS when he went to Iraq. He would always be concerned about the minorities in the present conflict between Israel and Gaza, concerned about the minority Christians in Gaza, and called on a daily basis to see how they were doing and see if they had enough food, enough aid to survive in the midst of war. Also noted for his environmental analysis, Laudato Si, a great document, one that I have taught and really tried to embrace, and as I read it over from time to time, just remarkable document in terms of its scientific analysis, its biblical analysis, its moral analysis, and its plea for our common home, that we have that type of environmental conversion that the Pope advocates, where we look at this problem with new eyes and a new heart. Also very much working for peace and trying to create more peaceful conditions. We saw that in his letter Fratelli Tutti, where he challenged the just war theory, our traditional Catholic moral theory with regard to war, and said, well, in the contemporary world, does that theory really work? Where you have the bombing of innocent civilians, bombings of hospitals and schools. Do we have to take a look at that and say, well, war in the present situation is not uh, really war that we traditionally have had on the battlefield. It comes right into where people are living and creates all sorts of problems and difficult situations. And so we must look at that just war theory, and certainly also in terms of nuclear arms and a nuclear deterrent. Pope has raised questions about that and that strategy and how we have to divest ourselves of nuclear weapons, and the importance of a strong international order to work against war in so many situations where it arises. We also saw his passion for immigration and helping the immigrants and refugees. Many of his initial trips were just concerned about that, and certainly a balance is needed, as we all know, in terms of that issue, that countries can't be overwhelmed with difficult problems, but we also have to have the outreach to help those who are truly in need. So getting that balance right. And then the Pope did it by pretty much by example, saying we're going to welcome a family to the Vatican, encouraging us in whatever way we can with our resources to welcome families who are fleeing persecution. Some families, of course, it's a question of life and death, and they have to leave their country, and that creates a difficult situation for them and also for the receiving country, and that balance is certainly needed. And the Pope encouraged us to pray about that and to discern a good way forward. Pope also raised some concerns about the liturgy in his pontificate, particularly the abuse of the privilege with regard to the Latin Mass, where people would advocate for the Latin Mass over and against the reforms of the Second Vatican Council and say, well, we have to move away from the Second Vatican Council and back to an old traditional liturgy. The Pope said in exceptional circumstances it can be allowed, but certainly the ordinary liturgy should be the reforms of Vatican II, and it should be in the language of the people so that the people can participate and not just be observers. The Mass can be, really a very beautiful experience for many people, very touching experience, but are they more observers than participants? Whereas in their own language, they can participate more in the singing of the hymns and the responses, and that's what the Pope encouraged. Pope also reached out more for the inclusion of women in the Church, promoted women to high positions in the Vatican, and encouraged bishops to use the gifts and talents of women. He raised the issue of women in the diaconate, an issue that is still being studied. And the Pope was discerning about that in terms of when the Church would be ready for that type of change to elevate women to those positions. And for many, of course, that was a frustrating aspect of the Pope's pontificate. They wanted a change in that regard. And the Pope felt that change would come in time, but when the Church is ready for that type of change, and of course, that's always a difficult call to make. The Pope, in any regard, also said that we have to include women in decision making and in all levels of the Church. Also very much encouraging ministries to the divorced and separated, and making sure that that did not stop people divorced from receiving sacraments, trying to make annulments more readily available for people and to help people in difficult marital situations, and to be very compassionate about that and supportive for them. Pope also advocated for blessings for gay couples, that seeking the blessing of the Church on the relationship, in the sense that this was a positive, helpful relationship in their life. And if they sought blessings from the Church as good Catholics who loved one another, and those blessings should be offered. And the Pope would make a distinction between blessing in terms of the same level as a sacrament, but blessing the union and the love that the couple experienced in that union. And the Pope touched many hearts when he said, with regard to homosexuality and issues of that nature, that who am I to judge, that we should welcome all. And certainly that word in Spanish, todos, was the Pope's motto, all are welcome, and wanted a church that was for all. The Pope, of course, also continually asked us to pray for him. In humility, he knew he needed the prayers of the people of God, that it was a difficult and challenging ministry, and we know how well it is because there are many different opinions in the church with regard to many challenging issues. The Pope knew that, knew it well, and knew the need for prayer and the need for discernment and acceptance of one another in love when there are different opinions. I think an aspect of the Pope's ministry that touched me was in his trip to the United States. In his address to Congress, the 4 Americans that he mentioned as examples: Abraham Lincoln, because of his Emancipation Proclamation, the freeing of slaves and ending slavery in the United States; Martin Luther King Jr. in his advocacy for expansion of civil rights for black people in terms of voting rights, in terms of fair housing, in terms of equal employment opportunities. And we know, with regard to that we still have a work unfinished. Thomas Merton, in terms of his spirituality and his inclusion of other religious groupings and his ecumenical outreach to Buddhists, to those of different religions and faiths, that we should have a mutual dialogue with them. And finally, Dorothy Day, for her example of advocacy for justice, both in terms of feeding the hungry and advocating for social change where it is needed, and her strong stand against war and for peace. Personally, a few remembrances of Pope Francis. Kathy and I had the privilege of a papal audience with the Pope. He would have these Wednesday audiences, general audiences, and we were there and got to be very close to him in terms of seeing him in the Pope Mobile and just feeling his warmth and just that smile, reaching out to everybody, and his message of love for all. We also had the blessing of being at one of the Angelus on Sunday, and I remember the Pope giving us a beautiful message of praying for peace throughout the world. He mentioned where there were conflicts and the importance of praying for peace. And then he ended by saying, go and have a good lunch. Again, that sense of that human touch, that it's important that we certainly feed each other spiritually and listen to the Lord, but also having a good meal is important as well. And then we had the privilege of being with him for Papal Mass in Madison Square Garden, and remember him at that time, his homily talking about the importance of reaching out and encountering others who are homeless on the streets, that as we travel around the streets of the city, we see people that are in need, and the Pope said, never walk by them, always stop, always express caring for them, even if you don't have money to give, give a greeting, let them know they're loved and cared for. They are made in the image and likeness of God, and that always stuck with me, his concern for those who are poor. And then finally, during the pandemic, we had the privilege of through media with daily Mass with the Pope, and we look forward to it. We look forward to his homilies and to his message of hope and encouragement. We have all lost a great leader, a great friend, in the sense of that warmth and compassion, and also just a great person who expressed love for Jesus, for all of us. So for all of that, we say thank you to Jesus for the gift of Pope Francis. We ask eternal rest for him, and we pray for guidance from the Holy Spirit as we move forward. God bless you, Francis. Thank you, Francis.